I'm going to present the digital side of the main agroecological structure that is a tool for valuing agrobiodiversity. It's the result of many years of work in my university with my group, supported also by the CEF and our DSSP. I'm going to begin with a question. What is the environmental dimension? The environmental dimensions for us is the complex, continuous, and deep interrelationships of different intensities and directions that occur between ecosystems and cultures. And what is the culture? For us, the culture is the totality of human thinking and action. It means this culture is carried out through the symbolic structure. It means the way to think about the nature and the human organization, the way to organize the authorities, the hierarchies, the power. It means the economic, social, political, and military relations, and the technological platform. These are three big groups that interact every time. It means that we are nature, but we are not ecosystem. But we interact every time with the ecosystem. We transform the ecosystem throughout the culture, throughout our ways of living and think. And one of the main transformations are made by agriculture. Agriculture is the human action over the produces. But also the livestock is a big interaction of human beings with herbivores, but in a cultural way. It means in a complex way. It means that agriculture is the main environmental modification of ecosystems. And from an environmental perspective, it's not only the ecosystemic order that agronomists, the conventional agronomists are every time talking about, but they're talking about only crops. But it's not only crops, but the biodiversity, ecological relationship, organism, and so on. But it is also the cultural order. And when these two orders become one, we have a kind of socio-ecological or environmental system named agroecosystem. And the agroecosystems are the base of model of agriculture, and but not all agricultural models are the same. For one side, we have the green revolution model that today we denominate the agriculture, industrial agriculture 4.0. But at the other side, we have the alternative agricultures, alternative to this model of green revolution. And in the medium term, we have the sustainable agriculture. That I don't like to talk about that because in Argentina, for example, or Brazil, people say that have 40 million hectares of soybean sustainable. So we have problems with this concept. But in the agricultural sector, the green revolution model left a strong dissatisfaction. You can see here an isolated tree, playing with erosion, two very poor people worker. The soil is here, and we have some unsatisfaction with the model. For example, we have different effects on human and non-human health, water pollution, soil, losses of biodiversity, polarization of societies, exclusion, inequality, dependence on transnational corporations, and awareness of the complexity of environmental interactions, little or no appreciation of ancestral knowledge of peasant, indigenous, or Afro-Colombian communities, and so on. And with this unsatisfaction, it emerged the agroecology. The agroecology is a new cultural and scientific model, but has at least 4 meanings. One of them is a very powerful social and political movement, very powerful in Brazil and Cuba and Mexico. But at the same time, agroecology is an agriculture system. We name ecological agriculture. At the same time, it's a science, the science of agroecosystem. But I propose to my colleagues to consider also the agroecology as a symbol system, as a symbol tissue. And so agroecology addresses all cultural aspects of agroecosystem and therefore conducts studies of symbolic, socioeconomic, and technological relation with, obviously, historical, gender, equity, sustainability, social justice perspective. And we recognize the complexity of the agroecosystem in its definition. We say that the agroecosystem is the set of relationships and interactions that occur between soil, climate, cultivated plant, weed, so on, and human groups in certain physical and geographical space. But when you approach this relation from the point of view of the energy flows and information or the material cycle and the culture, it means the symbolic, social, economical, and political relationships which are expressed on different technological forms of management within a specific cultural context. You have an agroecosystem. It means it's a very complex subject of study. And we can talk many times about the multiple practices and example of soil, water, and biodiversity management, but I have no time to do that. But if you look at this beautiful slide, you can see that the management of biodiversity at the scale of farm, this is Professor Miguel Altieri, is one of the most important scientific related to agroecology. But you can also study the agroecology in the landscape. In the landscape, where agroecology has an encounter with the environmental thinking, the landscape, ecology, and agroecology. But before continuing, we must pose another question. Is the agroecosystem the farm or is it the crop? Because if we put our definition here, our definition, at this sugarcane crop, we can say, yes, this is an agroecosystem. But if we put the same definition on this coffee crop agroecosystem, we say, yes, another kind of agroecosystem. And here we have a livestock, and we say, yes, this is also an agroecosystem. But this is the farm of Don Pedro, Don Peter farm. So, no, this is true. So the farm is the agroecosystem. So we propose consider the minor agroecosystems. It means the cultivation side, the meadows, the agroforestry, and the major agroecosystem, the farm. The farm is another hierarchy of agroecosystem. And at the landscape, we can study the agroecosystem matrix, and then we can study the region and countries and so on with the complexity of the environmental thinking. So the encounter with the ecology and of the landscape, the ecologists of the landscape study the composition, the structure, the functionality, the change and connectivity of these remains of forests and corridors and so on. And in Colombia, the Professor Tomás van der Hamen proposed this concept, the ecological structure of the nation support, with the main ecological structure of the landscape. It means this kind of vegetation plus ecological infrastructure. And he said the ecological infrastructure is the vegetation inside the agroecosystem, and he said no more. But we took this concept, and with this beautiful slide from Vietnam, for my friends of Vietnam, we proposed the main agroecological structure of the major agroecosystem, and we define it as the internal and external spatial configuration or arrangement of agrobiodiversity, because the agrobiodiversity is the key of management the agroecosystem without pesticides. In the major agroecosystem and spatial connectivity between its various sectors, patches, and corridors of vegetation or production system with each other and with the surrounding landscape, historically constructed and regulated by cultural variables. It's mean complex. The mass, the main agroecological structure, is a complex concept. So you can see the difference between these two farms. Farm with henses, edges, polyculture, corps of water, silvopastoril system, and the tree that I showed you in the past slide, with only a prairie, only a crop. So this farm has more structure than this one. And it's the same thing at the level of landscape. You have some metrics of unstructured agroecosystem in some region of Colombia, because here we have the first farm, and there is no trees, there is no connectivity, and the second one, neither, the third one, neither, but the fourth, neither, and neither the five. There is a landscape without a structure, but we have others as this one with a developed structure of in terms of agriculture. So how is the mass measured and interpreted? We know that it's an attribute to be measured in the agrobiodiversity with a two-dimension, ecosystem and cultural, five criteria, and more or less 25 indicators. But we have a difficulty. The difficulty is that the agroecosystem, the major agroecosystem, we can't see them in the landscape because we don't know if the farm is here or the farm is here, because we need the map of the cadastral map. So we have to show it. This is a work made by biologists in my country, showing some different kind of cover-tier coffee and other kind of land and cover vegetation. But if you put the map, the cadastral map, immediately the reading, the way of reading the landscape change in a very significant way. So we measure 10 criteria. The first 5 criteria are ecological, ecosystemic criteria, the connection with the ecological structure of the landscape, extension of external connectors, perimeter, living fences, diversity of external connectors, and extension and diversity of internal corridors, fences, fetches, and so on. In those, we utilize digital tools to measure these criteria. But we have other 5 criteria from the culture order. It means the land use within the farm, ecological or conventional management practices, soil, water, and biodiversity conservation practices, awareness, perception, knowledge of agrobiodiversity, and action capability. So I'm going to, well, there is a table for the interpretation of this index. And how the farm connection is measured with the ecological structure of the landscape. The criteria number 1 is we took a Google Earth image and property cadastral information, draw a circle starting from the center of the farm, identify the land use within the circle with the current land cover methodology, determine the distance between covers and bodies of water, determine the density of land use, and use a table to make an interpretation. This is a table. Our work have many tables of interpretation. So this is the way that we measure the area of influence of the land, of the farm and the landscape. And we use a relative distance proportional to the radius of the circle. We have some examples of the thesis or PhD thesis made for one of our students. We have all the criteria number 2, the external connectors. We measure these connectors. We made an evaluation, and then we have studies of the diversification with richness of stratification, and then we have some interpretation of this kind of measures. You can see here an external corridor that is a forest in Colombia in a real work. Then we have the internal connector extension that in Colombia, it's mainly the barbed wires as internal connector. It means that fences, there is nothing in that barbed wires. And we prefer to have a flowers bank inside our farms that these barbed wires. This is another example. And we use also digitalization tools here in the land use, and we measure this favorably to agrobiodiversity or not favorably with the land use into the farm. So I am impressed because I have no more than 5 minutes. 5 minutes. I am corriendo. Running. I'm running. So we have another example, and the others, the other criteria are measured with various indicators and different qualitative and qualitative techniques. And we have a little example of digitalization versus mass on this PhD study that aim to study the relationship between mass and agrobiodiversity management practices and cultural farming aspects with diversity and ecological function of dung beetles. And she used the satellite imagery, photo interpretation, and participatory cartography. But right in the study area, we have had resolution problems and clouds in the satellite image. You know, this was a problem. And we said, what are we going to do? Okay, we appealed to the doctoral study support program, and they financed the purchase of a drone. And here we are, learning to handle it until he never came back. He got lost, tangled in high voltage cable. It was a tragedy. It was the real life. But nevertheless, we learned how to select and delimit our study areas. We learned how to plan our flights. We worked the map with community social cartography. This is Ingrid Quintero. We assembled the map, thousands of photographs. And we have some very interesting results that I can't go to show you because there is no time, but only to say that with these results, we have things very interesting like that. The greater the complexity of the vertical structure of the vegetation in the connectors, the greater the number of beetle species that they can harbor. And we have this model, very interesting, with indicators. Of course, the beetles was a big indicator of the functionality, but also the internal connector extension, but also the fragment distance, also the arrangement of forage system, the sanitary management, the pasture rotation, the conservation practice, and perception of agriculture and the management capacity. And so on. We have other very interesting results, but I want to say only that the beetles significantly improve chemical and biological properties of the soil by exerting their functional activity. I'm going to finish. We have some studies in progress, and many others. Mass and climate change. We have 2 or 3 theses on this field. Mass and food sovereignty. Mass and biocultural memory of the indigenous people, NASA in the Cauca region in Colombia. And very interesting study relating agroecosystem matrix and Lepidoptera in a landscape in Colombia. Very interesting. We have some articles. If someone wants to interact with me, I'll be very happy to interact with you. Connected farms and landscape through Agrobiodiversity. But beyond our results, I want to quote this paragraph of Massimo De Marchi, a professor from Padua University who is using our index. He says, technology for all as a dynamic combination of available tools adapted to a specific location and culture of myriads of agroecological small farms, going beyond the universalizing closed menu of technological supply for standardizing conventional large farm precision agriculture. And he said that in this perspective of technology for all, there is a basket of promising open application consolidating agroecology and its plural dimension of innovation based on knowledge-intensive approach, knowledge sharing, co-creation of knowledge, common goods and heritage of humanity at different scales. Because agroecology is considered in some part like something without importance. But agroecology and agrobiodiversity is the key of management the agroecosystem of the future. So we have a new concept with multiple scientific, technological, socioeconomic application with which require more research and dissemination in Ghana, in Nigeria, and so on. My acknowledge to my people, to the Institute of Environmental Studies and the Center for Development Research, and for everybody who support our investigation. Thank you.